Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And I turn your attention back to events at Swaleside Prison last night. The wing that was essentially overrun by inmates has now been taken back. It's back in the control of the authorities. About 60 inmates were reported to have taken over that wing. Specialist tornado teams sent in at about 7 p.m. last night to restore order, and a prison service spokesman said afterwards that all those involved at the Category B jail had surrendered and were back in their cells by 1 a.m. 14 minutes after 10 is the time. We've done a lot on prisons lately. Nick took an astonishing call from a fellow who'd been a prison guard briefly. I don't know if you heard it. I think, was it 20 people that were part of his intake, and they get back together for a Christmas knees up, and only one of them is still in the service. How has it been allowed to get so bad is one of the questions I'd like you to answer, if you can, from the perspective of being inside. But also, how do these riots happen? I know that may sound like a silly question, but prison really is the best example of those issues that you either know everything about or nothing about. And it seems to me that, as an outsider looking in, are they constantly on edge? The prison's constantly on the edge of this sort of behaviour, or has something happened in recent years? Astonishing cuts to the service. Read Private Eye magazine to read about how G4S essentially cut provision back to the bone at the last prison to suffer serious rioting. And there has to be, doesn't there, a relationship between the fact that you're speaking about people who are on £18,500 a year, often with little or no training, and expected to police corridors and wings in which can be housed some of the most dangerous people, unhinged people in the country. Why are our prisons in such a mess? I'll take any answer you've got on that, and I'm interested, as always, in hearing from former prisoners as well as prison officers past or present. How has this situation escalated? You've had a succession of justice secretaries, go Grayling Gove Truss, wouldn't it, in that order, all quite high-profile politicians, all relatively high-powered members of various cabinets. The last one and this one, Mr Gove, of course, surplus to requirements as far as Theresa May is concerned. But it's not a day, I don't think, for speculation. It's a day for information. You've been in jail, either as a result of your crimes or as a result of your job. How bad is it, just in the sort of scheme of the last 20 years? It looks to me from the outside that things are pretty close to a complete meltdown. Why? Is it because there are too many prisoners? A succession of mainstream former Home Secretaries actually queued up yesterday to call for a serious reduction in the number of people in prison. So the question becomes, why are so many people in prison? And why are so many prisons apparently so close to total meltdown? 0345 6060973 is the number you need. I can tell you now, this last Friday before the Christmas break is historically quite quiet. So if you've sort of tried and failed to get through to the programme this year, or sort of not quite come up to the plate, today's the day to do it. If you can answer any of those questions, you're pretty much guaranteed a line into the studio. 0345 6060973. It's 10:17. Joanne Webb is in the LBC Travel Centre.
Thanks, James. Good morning. In Northamptonshire, the M1 is closed southbound at junction 17 at the M45 junction because of an accident within the roadworks. There are long queues on the approach. In London, the Rotherhithe tunnel's closed both ways following an accident. And in Hampshire, the A33 is closed both ways at Chinham because of an accident that happened much earlier on this morning. Now, Storm Barbara is causing chaos in Scotland. Lots of problems. ScotRail not running between Oban and Glasgow Queen Street, and there's a revised service between Glasgow Central and Newcastle. Restrictions on the Forth Row Bridge, and Skye Bridge is closed to high-sided vehicles. And flights at Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen airports are all affected. Various delays and cancellations. The advice is to check before you travel to the airport. For more real-time traffic updates, go to lbc.co.uk.
LBC. Not every star is burning bright this Christmas. Across the UK, owners of sick or injured pets are experiencing the fear of losing their closest friend. PDSA provides vital life-saving treatment for these pets when their owners simply can't afford to. But we're a charity and desperately need your help. So please text STAR to 70020 to donate £5 this Christmas. PDSA, saving pets, changing lives.
Text STAR to give a one-off £5 donation and consent to future calls and texts. You'll be charged £5 plus your standard rate message.
This is LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
18 minutes after 10. No prizes for guessing that this is pretty close to my own position. This unsigned text says the proposition, how do we simultaneously deter, punish and rehabilitate people in one system is difficult enough without adding, how do we make money from this to the mix as well? And my correspondent adds, this also works for the railways, the post office, the NHS and the teaching profession too. I think you're right, but you begin to wonder sometimes whether maybe the emperor has actually got some clothes on and you're delusional. You're, what's the word? Hallucinating his nudity, because it's so obviously right from where I'm sitting that I can't quite understand why so many other people don't see it clearly. The prisons where staff levels have been cut and prisoner levels have gone up are going to be vulnerable to unrest. And yet, of course, if making a few quid at the end of the process is part of the plan, then how else do you think things are going to pan out? But I want to know how they happen. How do the riots happen? Are we looking at a new period in the penal history of Britain, or is this just business as usual, albeit with a slightly 21st century flavour? Martin is in Southend. Martin, what would you like to say?
How you doing? Yeah, well, basically, I mean, as an ex-offender and an ex-inmate, I believe that the only way you can go forward with it, it might sound a bit outrageous, but I think it's probably the only light in the tunnel is with the prison officers at the moment. It's nothing meant bad about this. They're sending them in. You know, they've not got no experience regarding prisoners. They're coming out of maybe normal jobs to go into the prison service. What needs to happen for my intake of it, and I think it's the only way out, is to put ex-prisoners in all these prisons on the wings, because they know how to connect with the prisoner, number one. Number two, the atmosphere will calm down a little bit. I'm not saying give them bottles of champagne and caviar as prisoners, because if you've done something wrong, you've got to pay the penalty. We know that. But I think at the moment, people keep saying, why are these riots starting? Because obviously, you know, there's so much bad atmosphere in there at the moment.
Why is the atmosphere worse than it's been previously?
Well, the atmosphere is worse than it is previously, because obviously, number one, the prisons are overcrowded. Obviously, you know, there's 3 or 4 to a cell. There's so many drugs in prison at the moment. It's making it's a disaster. It's going to happen. I just think it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's just going to go.
When did you get out, Martin? When were you last inside?
Well, I was inside quite a few years ago, and the last prison I was in, obviously I won't mention it, but that was a private-run prison.
Yes.
And from my knowledge, I'm not going to run the prison officers down. It sounds like I'm sitting on the fence, but from my knowledge, they haven't got the people skills to cope with, you know, a man that's done a petty theft crime, or he might be a Cat A armed robber. The thing is this, you need to approach these prisoners with the attitude, I mean, you've got to give and take. You know, obviously if you commit a crime, you're going to be punished. You're going to be standing in a Ritz hotel. But the thing is, the way it is at the minute, it's going to explode, and it's just started. It's only just started. This is going to go right through the country, and I hope not, that someone is going to get seriously injured, because what's happening is the prisoners at the moment, they're so full up, the conditions are absolutely rancid. It's like back in the old Victorian days, overcrowded.
How has it been? I've got 2 questions for you. Can you tell, as a prisoner, can you tell the difference between a private jail and a publicly owned jail? Is there a different feel behind bars?
Well, yeah, there's a different feel, because obviously the prison officers that run the wings. I'm not going to say this in a rude way, but I mean the last one that I was in, most of them used to work in a superstore as a security guard, and I'm going to say this in a respectful way. They haven't got a clue what's going on.
I hear you. And 18.5 grand starting salary with 6 weeks training, as some people have told us on the station in recent weeks. It kind of makes your point for you, doesn't it? But the problem is, for me at least, I hear what you say. I think it might be a little bit bonkers to put ex-prisoners on guard duty, Martin, just simply on the question of their proven track record of criminality might be a bit of a problem, don't you think?
Well, yeah, obviously, like I said, people are going to say it was outrageous.
I'm giving it lip. I'm sort of putting it up the flagpole, but it does occur to me that if corruption is already a problem, it's unlikely to be solved by putting more convicted criminals in charge of prisons. But there may be some more mileage in it. Can you answer the question of? I kind of want to ask, how has this been allowed to happen? But really, it's a question of why do you think this has happened? And I know your answers include overcrowding and drugs, but I'm thinking more about the failure to notice it, because the way you describe it is blooming obvious, isn't it? There's too many prisoners, they're in disgusting circumstances, there's too many drugs around, the officers are undertrained, underpaid. But I'm kind of thinking, why were the country's eyes closed, Martin? Why is this taking us by surprise, given that the reasons you provide are fairly compelling?
Well, basically, when people go to prison, obviously members of the public, not all they say, that's where they belong, and everyone's forgotten about it. The thing is this has been going on for years. This is going to be... Everyone's
forgotten about it. That's a good answer. Do you think, really, unless there's a riot, and however much, we sit here wringing our hands and pretending that we don't give a fig about prisons or prisoners?
Well, that's exactly my comment. Lock them in and throw away the keys. That's not the point. The point is, this is going to get worse, and the only way forward is to sit down round the table and talk some sense, because at the end of the day, it's the same thing over and over every year. Every year is getting worse. We're going to do something about it. Nothing's happening. It's come to a boiling point now, and as you can see yourself, without being moved, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, well, we'll examine the whole iceberg today. I am going to stick to my guns on your original suggestion, though, that putting the foxes in charge of the hen house is historically not necessarily the way forward, but it's a thought, it's a view, it's out there. 0345 606 0973. Unless you've got a better answer, you can't really mock Martin for suggesting that former prisoners would have a better understanding of how prisons work. But, sort of spluttering incredulity, that sort of sense that you stare and stare and stare at a story in the hope that something will change, that some glimmer of understanding or enlightenment will emerge. You're looking, as he says, at people who, might have been working in a Tesco's warehouse last week, and 6 weeks later, after some very sort of low-level training, they're in a prison. I want to know what that's like. 0345 606 0973. It's another profession that used to, despite possibly being a bit maligned in the media and despite having legion problems, it used to actually be quite respectable, being a prison officer. I don't want to turn into some sort of reactionary, rose-tinted retrospective, but being a screw, as they were called, being a prison officer used to be a career. It used to have longevity. It used to have a degree of dignity, a degree of respect. And now being a prison officer, you really are just a sort of glorified trolley pusher. Does that ring true with you? Like Martin, I'm at great pains not to offend you if that's what you do for a living. But it does seem to me that part of the problem here is something to do with status. I could be wrong. I probably am. You can call me. You can tell me. Nathan's in Henfield. Nathan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time call.
You're very welcome.
Great show.
It's all right.
Right. So listen, I'm an ex-prisoner. I was in prison from 2006 to 2014. So I've seen a lot of changes in prison. But one of the things that I have seen is the leniency of officers towards prisoners, and I think that has played a part on on what we're seeing now with the riots. And one of the things
leniency in what way? Tell me what you mean.
Well, leniency basically on...
I know what the word means, but give me some stories.
Well, basically on what prisoners can get away with.
Right.
And I'll give you the best example is like myself. I played the game in prison, and basically I got away with a lot of things in prison. I've been sort of nicked for loads of things, petty things, mind you, sort of like having CDs, contraband, and all that stuff, but. If you play the game, you can get away with. But
if there's two guards, the reason I question the use of the word leniency is because if you've got two guards in charge of 120 people, they can't they can't sweat the small stuff, can they? It's not necessarily a question of being lenient; it's a question of being too busy.
Well, yeah, that too. It's a question of being too busy, but also the thing is, they much rather sort of like turn a blind eye on certain things than to sort of like get stuck in and confront the prisoner. And also, it depends on what level the prisoner is. You know what I mean? If you've got someone who's just sort of like in for 2 weeks or whatever, they know they can't go hard on him. You know what I mean? He's got to be out. Then again, someone who's doing a long time, they also don't want to have the chance to give him some ammunition to get into sort of like
But the riots happen when the guards stop being lenient, don't they? I mean, or when the prisoners feel aggrieved. The idea that the guards should be throwing their weight around more.
Yeah, but you know what? It only takes one person.
How does it happen? How does it happen?
Well, okay, so basically, it takes one prisoner to sort of like be aggrieved about anything. It could be because he got nicked in prison for something petty. He'll go and tell someone else, and that someone else will go and tell someone else, and then be like, you know what, that's happened to me. And then what is it? They're all going, they're all cooped up together, and they all start sort of like hatching a little sort of like, let's do this at a certain time, and then it just escalates like fire. It just rapidly just escalates, and before you know it, the prisoners have got hold of the whole wing.
Have you ever witnessed a sort of?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because this is the thing I find weird. Whenever I speak to people who've spent time in prison, they talk about these disturbances as if they're quite commonplace, and yet obviously there's a threshold that gets crossed and the media find out. But on Twitter, some of the activists in this region, they tweet quite early on. I'm hearing about reports from Kent. I'm hearing about as if it happens quite often, but unless a certain line is crossed, it doesn't really make the news.
I think one of your callers before me said that or maybe it was you. I'm not sure, but said something about basically officers coming into the prison system. But last week they had a job done in Tesco.
Yeah, that was me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So basically, we used to have, when I was in up in Staffordshire in a private prison, we used to call the prisoners who literally just left Tesco's to come to work in the prison, and we used to go from Tesco straight to Serco's. You know what I mean? That was the level of and also the people the prisoners used to come into the prison, the officers used to come into prison. They were young as well, young guys, and the turnover was immense. 1 minute you see an officer for 2 weeks, and then next minute you heard that he's gone.
See, this is the thing that's got me baffled, Nathan. This is the thing I don't quite understand. But is it just that we don't care about prisons until things kick off? Because every prisoner who describes these scenarios to me is pretty much writing a recipe for a riot, and yet government hasn't noticed.
Well, listen, it just happens. It just happens until it escalates to a point where the media get sort of like get involved, and then they show these these videos from prison.
Yes.
Prisoners. So and then it goes out.
Well, that's it. It's the only time the newspapers do get involved is when they've got evidence that it's really a holiday camp.
But the thing is, it does happen quite regularly.
Mate, I'm late for the news, Nathan. I'm sorry, mate. That's a really good call. Merry Christmas to you. Keep your nose clean. It's 10:30. As you just heard in the news bulletin, rather closer to home, issues of law and order reached boiling point yesterday when a prison in Kent became the latest to suffer a severe disturbance, 60 inmates taking control of a wing. I've got a million questions, but I haven't quite articulated the one at the heart of all of them, which is just a sort of puzzlement. Is it because of politics, do you think? Is it because it is so obvious that this is what happens if you buy into austerity, if you buy into public sector cuts, if you undermine the dignity of working people in the public sector, then inevitably they lose control of whatever it is they're supposed to be in control of. And because politically we've spent 6 years arguing about austerity and arguing about cuts and arguing about the public sector, all of the people on the other side of the argument from where I usually am kind of just have to put their fingers in their ears now and go la 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 la, because politically it's so obviously proof that the programme of cuts, the programme of undermining the public sector, the programme of defunding, demoralising, it's so obvious that that's caused prison riots that there's no political argument to have. Or am I just being obtuse? Am I seeing it too simply? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need, because every single person that we talk to paints, or effectively writes a recipe for rioting. I was just sort of some ingredients off the top of my head from the first two calls we've taken today. You've got overcrowding. So these are buildings, in some cases Victorian buildings, with cells designed to hold 2 people, now holding 3 or 4 people, or cells designed to hold 1 person, now holding 2. So that's going to be unpleasant. But again, I'm not expecting you to get your violins out necessarily if this person is in prison for beating up an old lady or doing something heinous. There should be a degree of deprivation, but not necessarily this degree of deprivation. So we've got overcrowding. Then you've got the drugs, which some people are very confused about. This new strain of so-called legal, formerly legal high, spice or black mamba or whatever you want to call it, it's a world about which even sort of seasoned drugs campaigners and activists know very little. This is zombie land, right? This is you smoke this stuff and you are oblivious. Very, very dangerous among the homeless community for identical reasons. Imagine a life so bleak that you would prefer a sort of form of oblivion where you're likely to wake up soiled by your own emissions. That's what you're talking about here. You see it in shop doorways around the West End at the moment, and similar in prison cells. So, again, it's being brought in often by officers, but to add to that list, overcrowding drugs, the pay of the guards. I'm not in any way excusing corruption, but I'm just suggesting that if you're on £18,500 a year, what are you taking home? Someone offers you £1,000 to bring in a bag full of contraband, you're going to be a lot more tempted than you would be if you were on £28,000 a year. That's just a given, isn't it? So underfunded, underexperienced, undertrained, understaffed. A question I really want you to answer if you can, especially if your politics is traditionally different from mine. What the hell did you expect to happen? And this is, of course, what is also going to happen in our schools next. 0345 6060973. Sam's in Slough. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James, big fan.
Thank you, Sam. Ditto.
I'm a bit nervous.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that you are not one of my recently released prisoner listeners.
No, but I do have a degree in criminology.
Oh, there you
I
go.
could probably shed some light.
I hope so.
I was only 3 when Labour came into power, so...
In 1997?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry, not 3. My maths isn't good, 5.
Okay.
But do you remember the slogan, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime?
Was that Labour? I would have thought that was the Tories.
No, I think that was Labour.
No, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right. It rings a bell now that you come to mention it. It just seems to... I mean, that was when Tony Blair was sort of out-Torying the Tories, I suppose. Tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Yeah, I remember that. Go on.
Tough on the causes of crime. So what that means, tough on the causes of crime means jail for more and more minor crimes. So obviously then we have that reliance on jail system. Community sentencing, that was quite popular and quite successful for a while, wasn't seen as enough. People wanted to see people going to jail. People wanted to see toughness on crime. So how do we pay for that? We pay for it with privatisation. Companies like Serco and people who run the jail service, it's in their incentive to do everything as cheaply as possible, because that's how you make your profits. And what we have as a result is a underfunded, cruel prison system.
Again, I'm in that sort of Emperor's New Clothes zone again, because it's so simple and so obvious the way you describe it. I can't help wondering how people miss it, but you've provided part of the answer. Politicians of every side, of every hue.
You talk about it all the time, James.
Talk about what all the time?
Populism.
Yeah, that's what I was about. It's the newspapers saying, "Oh, it's just like Butlins," and then when people say, "Well, people don't generally, you don't get someone hanging themselves every 3 days at your average Butlins." They put their fingers in their ears and just go la 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 la. That's 2016 in a nutshell. Fingers in ears, la 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 la.
It's worse than that.
Go on.
It's worse than that. Even when people are out, the Tories recently, I can't remember, it might have been a few years ago now, made massive cuts to the probation service. So not only are they putting people in jail, they're also stopping people from building their lives afterwards. So that's more people likely to fall into crime, go back to jail, fill the jails up, as well as the new raft of people who they've incarcerated.
This is. I suppose this is why fascists have to control the media, isn't it? Because either you are free, as we just are, to continue describing the chaos caused by rampant privatisation, commercialisation of public services, or you're not allowed to do it, and it just carries on in silence, which is obviously preferable to the architects of these disasters.
The thing is, though, James, what do you do about it? If a government comes in and says, we're going to be nicer to criminals in a time of austerity, they're going to lose a vote.
That's a very good point.
They don't even really have a choice. What we need to do is, as a society, is become more compassionate and understand that people make mistakes and, jail ruins lives. But we seem to not want that.
But it's voting to punch ourselves in the face. You vote, you should think more about the victims of crime. Think all the time about the victims of crime. The victims of crime aren't causing riots in prisons, and we're talking about riots in prisons today, you prunes. Honestly, I find it astonishing until you hear someone as sensible as Sam explain it in such stark terms. What we're doing as a species at the moment, what we're doing as a civilized... Vladimir Putin at the moment is boasting about Donald Trump being president of America. So two men who are going to escalate the nuclear crisis back to 1970s levels, and we're cheery. So now we'll talk about prison riots, and she's right, it's a similar theme. We do talk about it every day. This is actually bad for all of us. Oh, yeah, I don't care, though, because, string them up, throw away the key. It's sort of like government by imbecile. Jeff's in Woking. Jeff, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Jeff.
Yes, I worked in a couple of prisons about 15 years ago, and a senior principal officer said to me at the time that they rely on the goodwill and cooperation of the inmates to run a prison.
Yes.
That was then. Because of the ratio of inmates to staff, and I was in a relatively comfortable prison, and where I worked, it was relatively comfortable.
What does that mean?
Each inmate had... Well, it was an industrial prison where the inmates worked.
Yeah.
They earned a little bit of money. They had their own cell, and they had a TV, which they paid for out of their earnings.
Yeah.
And even so, at night time, there was about 1,000 inmates there, and about 10 or 15 staff on at night. So,
it's amazing.
Had there been a riot situation, but the emphasis was on the goodwill and cooperation of the inmates. And during that period, the emphasis changed from simply lock them up and make sure they stay there to rehabilitation. Now, otherwise you have the revolving door situation where they go in, go out and come back in again. And the idea is to rehabilitate inmates, but you need staff and you need time with the inmates to do that.
It's money. It's always money, isn't it? You need money, and this is why the last caller was so bang on when she said if you're after votes, you're not going to win any votes by saying we're going to spend more money on prisons, because the perception is that somehow the prisoners are getting a payout. That's not the truth, but we're not living in a world of post-truth politics, as we've all realised this year. So you get hold of it, the Daily Mail, all this money, and then some idiot will bang on about foreign aid again. You're never going to get money for stuff like this unless we can change the narrative somehow.
But the thing is, James, it's not only the prison service, it's all the institutions, the health service, fire service. It's all relying on the goodwill and cooperation of the staff.
And that's diminishing, that's disappearing. And then you've got people in my profession standing on the sidelines shouting, oh yeah, we should be spending it on hospitals instead of giving it to Somalians. 0.7% of the so 99.3% of the budget doesn't get talked about because 0.7% on foreign aid. I don't think I could sell it to the public, though. Could you? More money for prisons? How would you sell it, Jeff?
Well, the thing is, if you take away the goodwill and the cooperation, it results in riots, and that's the problem we've got at the moment.
But I'm never going to be hit by a prison riot, am I?
Well, no, but it's going to have a knock-on effect to society, I believe, when these inmates get out.
No, I believe that as well, but that's too subtle and intelligent. I just want to know, am I going to get hurt today by this prison riot? If not, I'll keep the money for myself, thank you very much. I don't want it going into prisons. Woohoo, post-truth, hey, 2016. Game over.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Jeffrey. It's 10:43. Merry Christmas, one and all. It's true, isn't it? Everywhere you look, it's just been turned into a selfish, stupid nation. And here you get prison riots. Oh, yeah, who do you blame for that? They're liberals. Yeah, liberals. It's all liberals' fault. We should be even tougher on prisoners than we are now. Let's stick them even more in a cell. All the reasons that all the professionals give us for the riots, do more of that stuff. And it's all about the money. Always, always, always follow the money. You cut the number of staff on a wing while the number of prisoners go up, you got problems. Full stop. How is it even really complicated or confusing to say this stuff out loud? 0345 6060 973. Joe's in Bognor Regis. Joe, what made you pick up the phone?
What made me pick up the phone? Those who you are actually discussing about.
You're
been discharged from prison within the last hour.
You just got out of prison in the last hour?
In the last hour, yes.
Okay, wow. What can you tell me?
What can I tell you? Well, the problems you are having in prison is self-infested. It's what I would describe as a push of unnecessary punishment beyond the time in which you have asked a prisoner to go and spend away from their loved ones and society. By trying to please the society more than necessary.
I'm just going to see. I just want to see if we can do something about your phone line, Joe, because I'm struggling to make out what you're saying. So I'm going to head towards the travel news. You stay where you are. Imagine that. He's sort of just been released from prison and he's in Bognor Regis. Talk about out of the frying pan. It's coming up to 11:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We'll try and get that phone line improved with Joe. He's just released from jail. But what I want you to tell me is this, okay? Is there any other explanation for why this happens except the classic one? The austerity cuts, underfunding, underpaid, undertrained staff in a dangerous job, it's going to kick off more and more and more. But and this isn't an insult to you or a criticism. I don't think you care. I'm not sure I care enough. Certainly. What, really? What, you're going to take money away from take your pick, Trident if you're a lefty, foreign aid if you're a bit stupid, any of these things that Yes, we'll take that money from there and put it there. So just pick your favourite recipient of public money, the NHS, and then you get someone writing a newspaper article or some bozo coming on the wireless and saying, oh, yes, no, we're not giving any... We're giving money to prisons. There are old people dying of the cold. We're giving money to prisons. It's just ridiculous. You have to spend money if you want to live in a secure country. And yet our politicians seem now to be pursuing the line that the only suitable repository for public money is the pockets of private shareholders. It's 10:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
What's going to be next? I'm told by some of my correspondents that air traffic control is going through a similar process of cost cutting in order to enhance profitability. Schools, it will happen to. Hospitals, it's already happened to. You wonder why people with the most money are getting richer while everybody else is getting poorer. And then you tune into a program like this, you get told why. And significant swathes of the population sort of just refuse to let the penny drop. I don't care about prisoners. All right, do you care about old people in care homes? Do you care about them? Because that'll be you one day. No, don't care about them either. No, nothing wrong with capitalism. We love the money. Keep it for da-da-da-da-da. It's absolutely astonishing. 2016, the age of unenlightenment, truly. And it's wonderful. You can hear them rubbing their hands together with glee. Every time someone in my job talks about immigration being the root of all our problems or foreign aid being the recipient of unfair money, all of these guys in their Bentleys and on their yachts are clinking champagne glasses and clipping their cigars. £500 million I made last year, Rupert. And the plebs are moaning about Ethiopian pop stars. Good one, Jeremy. Oh, dear. Imagine if they did stop spending foreign aid and then you'd have a population explosion because of all the contraception. You'd have probably another refugee crisis. There'd be all sorts of issues going on if we didn't spend it. But imagine if they did stop spending it. Who the hell would we blame next? Who the hell? Because don't look over here where all the money is. Look over there. What would we do if they stopped spending on foreign aid? I don't know. Spend it on prisons? Don't be ridiculous. Anyway, Joe is in Bognor Regis. Does that mean you were in Ford, Joe?
Yes, I was in prison for money laundering.
But were you in Ford open prison?
I was in Ford, yes.
Yeah, I was just sort of trying to work out which prison was nearest to Bognor Regis. Now, with respect, if we're talking about riots, what did you do for 6 months in an open prison? You probably didn't really see the side of prison.
I didn't do 6 months in an open prison. I did 5 weeks in an open prison.
Oh, good. Well, tell me about the other prisons. Tell me what it's like.
A category D offense.
Okay.
Well, outside of my sentence in HMP Wormwood Scrubs.
Right, okay.
Now, and then moved on to somewhere else within central London.
If I ask you a really simple question, and just for people tuning in, Joe got out of prison an hour ago. Why do prison riots happen?
Why do prison riots happen? Because the purpose of the punishment is extended more than what it is meant to be. People are unhappy. There are no health satisfiable.
Just watch your language if you don't mind, because there will be children listening.
Yes.
Okay, carry on.
I'm very sorry.
That's quite all right, Joe.
When prisoners go away to serve their punishment to pay back society, there are two parties involved in this. Now there is the family of the prisoner. No matter what they've done, they are still loved. And if you put a time to a conviction, this prisoner is still coming back to the community. This prisoner is still coming back to live next to you, whether it's in 30 years, whether it's in 14, whether it's in 9, whether it's in 2 years.
Yes.
Now, when you ship a prisoner out of London and then you send him to Dorset, where the travel hour to see his 2-year-old kid or his 3-year-old kid, where the travel time is about 4 or 5 hours, just to have a 1-hour visit, which will be cut short because staff is needed on another wing because of overcrowding. It can only be accepted.
I'm going to turn the telescope. I hear you. I'm going to turn the telescope around because you're trying to find a way to persuade the public we need to spend more on prisons, and saying that the prisoners are being denied access to their children. I completely understand why you make that point, and I personally find it relevant. But you know what the chomping half-wits will say? They say, "Well, you should have thought about that before you committed a crime." It's about the 2-year-old. My compassion, my empathy is for the child, not for the prisoner. But even if all of that was happening, even if prisons were even more miserable than they are now, the notion that prison officers would not be able to control a prison, that's actually got more to do with their conditions, hasn't it? It's got more to do with their staffing levels, their morale, than it has
their conditions. And I'll tell you why it is to do with their conditions. Now, when you look at the prison population, not everyone will be going in there for the keys to be locked up and thrown away. You would have people with mental issues locked up in prisons where you have lifers serving time. In 70% of the time, they would share a room at a point. Now, the percentage of those who are in the prison on a very long time is far lesser than those who are in prison on a short term. On a short term sentence. Now, the emphasis should be laid on those who need help, i.e. mental issues.
Just the list's too long. The list is too long, isn't it? All of the things that contribute to these circumstances. How unsafe did you feel in Wormwood Scrubs?
Oh, dear me. How could I explain this? It was really sickening.
Because I'm not going to be able to make people feel sorry for you. They'll say you committed a crime.
I'm not asking.
I know you're not. I'm just looking at where perhaps the campaigners are getting it wrong. I feel sorry for the officers, but if the prisoners feel unsafe, how the hell do the officers feel?
The officers' life is at risk. Should he deserve to do his job at 100%? Because they don't have the equipment, the training, nor the facility itself. The estate itself is not.
But it's so obvious. It's quite incredible. What are you going to keep your nose clean now? Are you going to?
Oh yes.
You would say that. No one's going to say no, James. They're going to go out and turn over.
I'm back in society. I'm a member of the public now. Yes, and.
What happened this morning? What happens when you get turned out of jail? I mean, literally, just talk me through what happens. Did you know that you were going to be released today?
£46 and that is it. Goodbye. You get a slip of paper that sends you to the job centre plus.
And where do you have family? Where is home? Where is home for you?
Home is in London. I am from the northwest of London, and I'm going back to the northwest of London now.
All right. Well, be careful.
£6. Oh yes, I'll be careful.
But I don't want you to phone me again from just being released from prison.
I wouldn't phone you. I've done that. This is not a repeated thing. It's not what will continue to happen.
Good.
But you see, there are people who would pop in there, and they know they're coming out really quickly. Very high of that population.
Yeah, this is statistically very. Yeah, it's almost like a revolving door, and you can do two things with that information. You can think that we need a new door, we need a system that works better, or you can think, well, that proves that prison doesn't work. Prison doesn't work. What is prison supposed to do? Make us feel better about people being punished? That doesn't work. Everyone's furious. Reduce crime? Well, rehabilitation's non-existent. You just heard it from the horse's mouth. It's just the strangest story, this, because it sums up so much of the stuff that we talk about every day. You are demoralising human beings, working people, public servants. You are underfunding, underpaying, undertraining, and then wondering why things kick off. Joe, thank you. Keep your nose clean. Safe journey back to London. Have a great Christmas. Adrian's in Lincoln. Adrian, what made you pick up the phone?
All right there, James. How you doing?
I'm very good. What's on your mind?
I just really wanted to say Joe made a lot of the points actually that I was going to make. Interesting that you get a caller just out of prison.
I know.
I came out of prison myself last year.
Yeah, that's no good. He got out an hour ago, mate. You're not going to win the prize this hour.
Yeah. But in all honesty, the problem with prisons, it's absolutely endemic. It's overcrowding. There's so many issues, with prisons. The drugs are rife. Violence is constantly, Is it constantly? Were you in for a white collar crime? Yeah.
So fraud or something like that.
I say fraud. Yeah.
For fraud. So and you feel that violence is constantly bubbling under the surface because a lot of people will be in there for violent crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think one of the biggest problems, James, is that prisons are a public service, but people don't treat them, in the same way. People get involved if a hospital shuts down. People campaign, but when do you see public sort of saying, "Oh, this prison is closing, we need to, campaign to keep it open"? They just don't get involved. People don't see themselves as stakeholders, and I think that's, my kind of biggest sort of point that I want to make. At the end of the day, the majority of prisoners will be released back out into the community.
Yes.
So people need to kind of, look and think, well, if reoffending is costing the country $15 billion a year. So as you say, it's clearly not working sending, so many people to prison.
But I don't know how you'd sell it. Other countries just do it better. I think Germany has prison guards do the locking up, and everybody else is a teacher or involved in the rehabilitation process. Their reoffending rates are a fraction. The Scandinavian model, prisons are almost like finishing schools, where if you commit a crime, you go to prison, you come out considerably more employable than you were before, and yet. I don't know, is it a Victorian hangover for us, just like the archecture of the prisons?
Our politicians pander to the media, James.
Is it that simple, again?
Yeah, pretty much, because, what you sort of had, Michael Howard saying prison works back in the sort of early 90s. That was followed by Jack Straw, David Blunkett, both of them sort of, committed to sending as many people to prison as possible, doubling the prison population from 1993.
That's right.
And they wonder why these sorts of things are going on. Just one of the interesting things that came out during the Birmingham riot on Friday.
Yes.
Prison Governors Association, were relatively kind of, up there with sort of, the elites and what have you, the people that know what's going on. They issued a statement that said that NOMS, the National Offender Management Service, needed to sort out its collective amnesia.
Yes, that's right.
Quote.
Yes.
Collective amnesia. The country is being sort of, misled about what's going on in prison. They want you not to know at all. They cover up...
Because it was only a month ago that the Sun or one of the other papers got hold of some pictures that had been taken by prisoners who were serving sentences and tried to punt the line that it was all a holiday camp again. And people suck it up. I mean, that really has been the big discovery of 2016. The willful decision to be stupid, to be uninformed. Oh, yeah, here's a picture of someone smoking a joint in prison. Prison must be a right old laugh. So people are hanging themselves every 3 days. Riots are unfolding. Staff are demoralised. Poorly. We'll speak to some staff, I think. I'm not done with this yet. More political, actually. And it's not Conservative, Labour. It's not linked to any party. It's 1993 is the point at which we see a doubling in inmate numbers between then and now. And as an earlier caller with a degree in criminology, it's a lovely hour, actually, if you missed it. We took a call from one fellow who got released from jail an hour ago, and another call from a young lady with a degree in criminology. The last caller got out 4 months ago. I mean, everybody's qualified. The next caller is a serving prison officer to who we will afford a degree of anonymity. But I just want to bring the politics into it, because this is what is happening everywhere. And we're still putting up with it. We're still sitting on our hands, and we're still bleating about foreign aid instead of the things that are actually directly affecting us. 0345 6060 973. This curious habit, and you can see it now. Vladimir Putin, as you just heard in the news, lying through his teeth at a news conference in Moscow, lying through his teeth, utter disregard for the truth. But you know what he'll say? He'll say, I think 2016 has proved if you tell a lie often enough, it comes true. Donald Trump is now president of America, a man who could not stop lying. A lot of the key architects of the referendum result, barefaced liars, all of them. It's very hard to be a parent at the moment. It's very tempting to teach your children that cheats do prosper. Actually, being a liar, great for business. Being a racist liar, wow, the world is yours at the moment. But, meanwhile, public services, whether it's a prison, which is hard for me to get you to care about, or a hospital, which again, when the junior doctors tell us that they're being screwed, it's hard to get you to care about that, or elderly care, the care homes, again, bought up years ago by hedge funds and investments so that they could get their hands on the real estate. They don't care what's in the actual buildings because the value of the buildings is going up by so much every year. Everywhere you turn, utterly incontrovertible and conclusive proof that all of those warnings are coming true. Defunding, demoralising, privatising. Everywhere you turn. But still, our lords and masters in the media say, oh, don't look over here. Don't look over here where we're filling our pockets. Bloke that owns the Telegraph also owns the Ritz. Tells you everything you need to know about his priorities. He owns the Ritz, the actual Ritz. bloke that edits the Mail's got a country estate in Scotland. The owner of the Mail is still non-dom registered. He inherited his own father's tax status. Don't look over here, don't look over here. Don't look over here. Over there, look, there's an Ethiopian pop star who might be getting some foreign aid money. Meanwhile, a prison officer will die next year at the hands of a prisoner, and it will actually be our fault. Noel's in London. Noel, what would you like to say?
Well, I've listened to your programme this morning, and there's quite a lot of myths that have been, brought about. You seem to be, how do I put this? You seem to be reinforcing them.
Well, I've only taken calls from prisoners.
Right. I mean, the first one, they say that the prisons are overcrowded. They're not. They're understaffed, and they're understaffed drastically and dangerously understaffed, but they're not overcrowded. Right? It's a myth that the media keep putting about.
Well, there's twice as many people in prison today as there were in 2000.
But if you remember, under the Labour government, they built lots and lots of prisons, new prisons. So there is the capacity there to take more and more prisoners. So the myth that they're overcrowded.
I don't want to argue with you because you're a prison guard and I'm not. But all of the official bodies recognise, from the Prison Reform Trust to the Home Office, recognise that people are in cells. 2 or 3 people are in cells that were designed for 1 or 2 people.
The maximum you've got in any one normal cell is two prisoners. Okay. And what they've done is, in the old Victorian prisons, they've knocked 2 cells into 1.
But in the last 2 months, numbers have gone up by 1,000.
Yes, but there is still the capacity there. But what's happening is that the dangerous staffing levels, right? The government brought in, the management, Norman's brought in a new system to work called benchmarking. Now, basically, what that meant was that they were going to do a lot more with a lot less prisoners, a lot less staff. So what they did was they increased the core day.
I'm just going to challenge you. I'm sorry. I know it's your job, but Pentonville, built to hold 906 prisoners, it's currently got 1,300 in it.
Yeah.
That's overcrowding. Let's not get bogged down in this, but obviously, when you describe me as propagating myths, I look for the numbers. It's built to hold 906 people. It's currently got 1,290. That means that about 800 men will be housed in overcrowded accommodation, because if you're 400 over, then
Can I just tell you that they've got the capacity there. Well, the staffing levels.
I mean, you can't keep saying that. I don't want to get bogged down in this bit of the debate, and I completely value your contribution. But prisons are overcrowded. If it's built for 906 and it's got 1,290 people in it, that is overcrowded. But let's talk instead about the understaffing, because that obviously is something that you're part of. You are part of an understaffed, underfunded profession.
Well, what they've done is they've increased the core day. The core day is for inmates' time out of prison. Time or a cell, right? They've not increased the staffing levels, but yet they've increased the length of the day that we have to work. In the prison I work, right?
Yes.
They've just brought this benchmarking in, right? I'm on a 42-week rota.
Yes.
So that means each week is a different shift system, right? I've got 22 different types of shifts that I have to do. It's absolutely ludicrous. They've increased it.
Well, that sounds like management consultants have been involved to me.
Well, yes, very much so. They've increased the core day and they've not increased staff. Whereas the logical thing to do would be decrease the core day so you could increase the amount of staff that you've got on a landing or on.
But that would cost more money.
It doesn't.
Why not?
With the staffing levels they've got now, if they were to decrease the core day to, let's say, 6 hours, the staffing levels, they would have to be able to fill the landings with staff for those 6 hours, because then they wouldn't have to spread those same amount of staff over 15 hours. I mean, the logic is there, but they don't seem to see it.
Right. To be honest with you, mate, you've lost me a bit as well. Are you saying you don't need many staff? You don't need much staff when everyone's locked up?
No. Yeah, you don't. But when you can unlock the wings once you're fully staffed.
Track it back for me. When did this start? How long have you been a prison officer?
29 years.
29 years. Wow. What, is this the worst it's ever been, or not?
It is the worst it's ever been. I've never known it so bad. I mean, I've been stabbed. I've had a broken jaw. I've had urine, feces thrown all over me. but I've never ever been as frightened as I am now. It is absolutely crazy.
How do riots start, Noel?
Lack of supervision. On the prison I work at the moment, when I first joined the job, you wouldn't unlock a landing on the smallest wing unless you had 4 officers to the landing. Now they unlock the whole wing with 7 officers on the landing. Seven officers on the wing.
You know, as you tell us this, most people listening will just be saying, how has this been allowed to happen? And what would your answer to that question?
Successive government after successive government, from Jack Straw all the way through all the cuts of the austerity cuts. And Jack Straw was one of the first to
because it's one of the easiest things to do. No, who's going to protest if you're taking money out of the prison's budget? Who's actually going to protest? No, thank you. I don't want to get stuck down on that overcrowding thing, but I'm being bombarded with the statistical support for the position that prisons are overcrowded and have been every year since 1994, actually, which would tally with that earlier call suggesting that's when things started doubling. But your experience is horrible. 29 years in the prison service. I've never been as frightened as I am now. And why is he frightened? Because we don't care. We don't care. Shana's in Hornchurch. Shana, what would you like to say?
I just want to agree with basically what most of the people have been saying, because I'm going to talk on the behalf of like my boyfriend who was in jail and over 2.5 years ago. And from then, when I was writing to him, I knew things were going to get worse. He was a Category C prisoner and he was put in Belmarsh for 10 months of his sentence. He shouldn't have really have been there. And he said that there's so many young boys like him that were in there that shouldn't be in there for their crimes because they haven't got spaces for them in the Category C and the Category D prisons. They're in cells with 4 or 5 people when it's made for 2 people. They're not getting let out. There's no rehab. He come out of prison and they were supposed to get probation. They said, yeah, we're going to give you a house. We're going to give you this. He's gone to the house and said, yeah, sorry, mate, we ain't got houses for you. For 2 weeks, call back. 2 weeks, you call back, still ain't got nothing. And even to now, he said to me, if it wasn't for you helping me, I would be back in there. And he said, I would be scared because there's knives. When I went on prison visits, there was women with black eyes, broken wrists, everything, prison guards. And I feel sorry for the prison guards as well, but I just don't feel like they're being treated like humans. None of them, the prison guards, the prisoners, they're not being treated like humans, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
You understand most people listening to this are going to have a lot more sympathy for the prison officer who is in fear of his personal safety than they are for the prisoners, but of course what you remind us of is that the two are linked, aren't they?
It's both of them. I feel for both of them. I actually feel, and my boyfriend will say the same thing. He's a prisoner and he does not blame the prison officers. It's not their fault. It's the way that it's been managed. It's the fundings that have been cut. You know, they used to be able to get jobs. They used to, like, even at one point they was having a network rail scheme where the prisoners could change to be a network rail. That got cut because there's not enough money. And there's young people who come from families of parents with addictions.
Yes.
You know, people are coming from, they didn't choose to be like this. Obviously, there's people that commit crimes but there's a lot of people who are down on their luck. They have nowhere to turn to. As I said, he went to probation. They didn't even give him a house. So if it wasn't for me living in my little 1-bedroom flat saying, come and stay with me, he'd be on the streets, probably taking spice, probably he's gone back to alcohol.
And yet if people in my profession got hold of the story of him being given some form of accommodation when he got out, when insert here whatever fake victimhood you're punting today haven't got a home, then there'd be uproar. It's almost as if
someone was with, and as you say, but if someone was with mental health and haven't committed a crime, they'd be saying, oh, it's so bad we haven't housed people with mental health. These people in jail still have mental health. They still have problems.
And actually, you're wrong. No one cares about the homeless sleeping on the streets of this city. They just pretend they care when someone is using them as a weapon with which to...
As a scapegoat.
Yeah, to go down the anti-immigration road. I really, really care about refugees, but I don't look after them because I really care about the homeless. We need to look after the homeless you don't care about anyone. So and that's what 2016 has done. It's absolutely validated, celebrated and endorsed callousness on an industrial scale. It's cool to be callous. It's cool to be callous. It's gone mainstream, which is weird, because I think that people who are by nature quite callous, selfish, stupid, they always liked to feel like outsiders, but they're in the driving seat now. Stupid, callous people are essentially driving public policy. That's why everything's falling apart. I don't know who the new insurrections are going to be. I don't know where they're going to come from, but they're going to be very interesting to watch next year. And just in case you want to look back on this year, if you go to the LBC website or the Facebook page, they've put together some of my clips from this year. Guess how many? Guess how many they've gone for. What number? People viewing my sort of little viral clips this year, if you want to go and have a look at them. 25 million is the number that we've arrived at. 25 million views of these little clips. I'm sure if you go to the LBC Facebook page, where I only allow myself the treat of going there about once or twice a year, if you go to the LBC Facebook page, I'm pretty sure people will be explaining how 25 million views is proof of how unpopular I am. I don't want to second guess, but I'm pretty sure that there'll be a nice narrative there. 25 million views, that shows how unpopular he is. It's 11:16. I'm just wondering if there is any other explanation. And you know who's been Home Secretary, don't you, for most of the last 6 years? Theresa May. And we're talking about a prison system in complete meltdown while we've put her in charge of the whole shebang. You just wonder sometimes whether or not you're going to wake up from this horrible nightmare that 2016 turned into. What's that? You've been Home Secretary for 5 years and the prisons are a complete mess. The prisons and immigration were your two big jobs, weren't they, Theresa? Yeah, well, one's absolutely falling apart and the other is the reason that many people give for voting to punch themselves in their face earlier this year. What's that? You want to be promoted? Yeah, all right, you can have a go at being Prime Minister now. Brilliant. That's politics, when it's the editor of the Daily Mail who gets to choose who's in charge. Mike's in Lewisham. Mike, what's going on in our prisons? Right, we'll never know. Mike, we'll try and sort your phone line out. Martin is in Birmingham. Martin, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, I'm a recently retired probation officer who worked in the prison for 20 years.
Wow, okay.
And I've seen it go from, not a fantastic place, but a place where we could spend time with the prisoners, to a place now where the bell's ringing every 5 seconds because there's a fight and there's a prison officer being assaulted.
It's gone feral then. The prisons have gone feral.
Absolutely. The gangs run prisons now. Many of the drugs come in because gang members threaten prison staff who bring, especially the spice and mamba in.
Yeah. And that, of course, will undermine some of the calls for sympathy, won't it?
Indeed, but it's the truth.
Yeah, I know it is.
Yeah. One of the most worrying aspects is that radicalisation is going on in prisons, and because there's not enough staff, it can't be addressed. Chris Grayling was the guy who actually brought in this neoliberalism which we're under now. He started with the career service. I think Grayling is the government's hatchet man.
He's been, well, I guess so. I mean, Liz Truss has been given a hospital pass, I think, by anybody's standards. She's inherited a system that's all over the place. Doesn't the responsibility ultimately lie with the Home Secretary rather than the Justice Secretary?
Well, I think so, but Grayling, has been the guy, picked by the Tories to go in and do the tough stuff.
But it was bad before. I mean, it looks like 1993 was the point at which the numbers of prisoners started going up and the numbers of prison officers started going down. You can't lay it all at Grayling's door. It starts with Michael Howard. Jack Straw seems to get... Howard and Straw. I met Jack Straw. Yeah, it was. It started under New Labour, but then the. Is it just the money, Martin? I mean, very, very simply, because you pay more, you get better staff, you get better people, you get a better atmosphere, better morale, better run prisons, and they won't pay the money largely because the ones that haven't been privatised probably will be. They want to keep it all, get it all into the private sector, bring in the management consultants, say, well, you don't need a prison guard, you could get that done by a robot. That just money, and human beings always suffer as a result. Whether it's the staff, who it's easy to engender sympathy for, or the prisoners, which is a much harder task.
It's the American model which has been drifting over to England for the last 20 years, and I think that's the end game. I think we are approaching it now. And I think that's why you've got, the rise of a socialist sort of Labour Party. It's to address this type of
Well, that is a fascinating observation, because as you said that, Lane tweeted me to say it's quite annoying when you rightly lament the cool-to-be-callous nature of 2016 and yet patronise Corbyn supporters who oppose it. And that's similar to the point that you're making, albeit not as rudely as Lane.
Yeah.
Because that is probably going to be the next conversation that we have, the next topic that we have.
Well, it's all linked. It's all linked. You know, you've got the rise of the left here, along with the rise of the right. Well, I think we have to a point.
But don't jump the gun on my next conversation about Corbyn's confidence that he can win a general election and the sort of rebranding as a populist left winger. In the absence, though, of money, there's nothing that can be done to improve the system.
No.
It's just so odd. I'm looking for a dissenting voice, and by a dissenting voice, I don't mean some keyboard warrior in his mum's back bedroom tapping away on his Tesco laptop while touching himself, going, "Hang them, bring back hanging," or "prisons are full of immigrants, that's the problem here." I mean sensible people who know what they're talking about, kind of people who been squeezed out of public debate in 2016. Martin, thank you. Mike's in Lewisham. Mike, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
That's better.
I think my main point is you're absolutely right. The list is just too long. There are too many things wrong with the system. And I think actually now is the time to clearly have a debate about completely changing the way that we approach criminal justice.
Not going to happen, though.
Well, I think that's probably a problem with our politics at the moment, isn't it? People standing up for what's actually right and what's the right way to do things.
Well, do you work in the sector, do you?
Yeah, I do. So I run a community interest company called 3 Pillars Project, and we take ex-soldiers and rugby coaches. We go into prison and we coach people.
Oh, we lost the line again. And there it is. I mean, it is a root and branch restructuring that is necessary. Burn down the whole system and start again. And that's probably true of education as well. Less so of the NHS. 2010 had the highest ever patient approval ratings, the NHS. But of course, it's this blimmin' profession that I'm in. Just whispering in our ears all the time about how this is the problem, and it's never, ever, ever lay the blame at the feet of the people who've created these scenarios. Always lay the feet of the blame of people below you on the food chain. Always punch down, never punch up. And when punching down doesn't work anymore, then you do what we've done in 2016 and start punching yourself in the face. Rob's in Fleet. Rob, what's going on?
Hi there.
Hello.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry, yeah, good point, actually. Ho, 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 ho. Carry on, Rob.
My point is a kind of a left-wing conspiracy theory that might be one too far.
Go on then.
But if you think of the place in Holland at the moment, they're actually closing prisons because they haven't got enough prisoners.
Yes.
And if you're running a privatised prison service, where's your incentive then to rehabilitate prisoners so they don't come back?
Oh. You're getting paid per prisoner. So you would be a turkey voting for Christmas if you were turning people out of prison with everything they need to ensure that they never come back again. No, it's too mad. It's too mad.
Well, it's kind of
like I expect Keanu Reeves to come through the door in a minute in a long black trench coat and start explaining how actually, Rob, you now have to be erased because you've solved the Matrix.
Well, in Netherlands, they're actually in the strange position now of inviting prisoners from other countries to come to their prisons just to keep some open.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Blimey. And then the other countries would pay, so, I mean, the prison, so it's not, it's a good grief. Strange times, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Thank you, Rob. If anyone can unpick that logic, then they're welcome to grab the phone line that Rob has just vacated. If you have a privatised prison service, there must be an answer to that, mustn't there? Although, actually, how many times are we saying it? 2016, it seems, is the year in which it was proved that actually really obvious things will get passed by a public that's been essentially kind of brainwashed. If you've got a privatised prison service, their profitability depends upon prisoner numbers. Why the hell would they want to reduce prisoner numbers? I think that Rob must be wrong. There must be an answer to that question that undermines the apparent logic of his position, but I can't at the moment see what it is. I don't know why my phones are ringing off the hook on this today. 0345 606 0973 is the number. Traditionally, the Friday or the last show before Christmas, it's like trying to get blood out of a stone, but I just guess there's more people than ever before, and it's even true on a day like today. I want to try and do something Christmassy and cheerful, though. Talking about prison riots is not necessarily the most festive conversation we could have had. We might talk about Jeremy Corbyn next. At least he's got a beard. Dutch is in Sidcup, from Dutch prisons to Dutch himself in Sidcup. Dutch, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I think it's a big mess, really.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, because I was in prison. I was in an A-cat prison.
What for?
For selling A-class, for selling cocaine.
Okay.
I got 3 years, and for most of my sentence, I found I was complaining a lot about, certain things, like my information being leaked, to then being accused of certain things within the prison that I had nothing at all to do with, and then to try and clear my name took months on end, and it's just a shambles. And then I even realized from then, when I was in prison, that it was Theresa May who was in charge of the whole thing, and then now she's Prime Minister. That just blew my mind. And I think they wanted...
I don't know that she... I think the Justice Secretary now is responsible for prisons. It used to be the Home Secretary, but it's just certainly part of her purview, isn't it? And I guess maybe it is a little bit surprising that you can preside over the Home Office for 5 years and get promoted to Prime Minister.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Go on. What would you do if you were in charge?
If I was in charge, to be fair, I would change the governors, because I think they're the ones that are out of touch. They hardly... I think it's like a big cover-up. When it's inspection time for prisons, they lock away everyone that's a problem, and anyone else is out and about doing normal stuff, and so they don't see the real side of prison. They see the undercover side of prison that they want you to see.
So it's like the Queen. They say the Queen thinks everywhere smells of paint, because everywhere she goes, it's just been painted. The governors only get to see the sort of sanitised and... I got told, actually, I got told when, I think it was Grayling, tried to bring in lights out at 10 o'clock for the, for in a young offenders in particular, but possibly all prisons. And I got told, we'll tell the governor we've done it and we won't do it.
Yeah.
That's what officers told me, because it's such a stupid idea. It would take so long and it would cause so many problems, but the governors need to be told that we've done it. So we'll tell the governors we've done it, but actually we'll leave the lights on, which kind of plays into what you say.
Yeah, it's like they never come. When they come down, they're not in touch with anyone. They're just strict. They obviously have to have that power of authority and that thing about them, but they're still human, and we're human, I think, to be fair with you, the prison officers that are normally calm with you and human and approach you like you're a normal person, they're the ones that get the most respect. The ones that are you get in your cell, you scumbag, they're the ones that get no respect, and then that's when people don't want to get in their cell, and then that's when riots kick off.
But equally, some of them might have started off with good intentions, but if they're on £18,500 a year and they're being treated with the kind of disgusting behaviour that some officers have described to us, they're going to turn into bad prison officers pretty quickly, even if they started off intending to be good ones.
Yeah. It's a bit like the police then, I guess.
Oh, it might be, although as a convicted cocaine dealer, I'm probably going to come down on the side of the police, my friend, rather than on your side
that's fair enough.
that particular argument. Are you keeping your nose clean? Pardon the pun.
Definitely.
Good.
But do you know what? That's funny. But you know what? Yeah, I was trying to get rehabilitated inside and learn something, but because I was a foreigner, they didn't want to spend money on educating me. They was spending more money on trying to deport me.
Well, again, it's a cleft stick, isn't it? I'm trying to sort of reflect the view of some of the people listening. The notion of a convicted criminal being deported rather than rehabilitated won't necessarily strike them as scandalous. But of course, it's in everybody's interest that you come out of prison, wherever you end up living, less likely to commit a crime than you were when you went in. And that seems to me to be the most pie-in-the-sky element of this whole conversation. Speaking of pie in the sky, Jeremy Corbyn thinks he's going to win the next general election. Is it possible? Could this amazing year of political upsets end up turning in Jeremy Corbyn's direction next year? Your thoughts on that after this. This is Simon Conway with the news headlines.
The main suspect in the Berlin lorry attack has been shot dead in Milan. Italian officials say 24-year-old Anis Amri was killed after he fired at an officer who was on patrol at 3 o'clock this morning. Malta Airport says a plane from Libya has landed and there appears to be 2 hijackers on board. 118 people are believed to be on the Africa Airways flight, which was diverted to the island. The International Olympic Committee has opened disciplinary proceedings against 28 Russian athletes who competed at the Winter Olympics in Sochi. They're accused of manipulating their drugs tests at the Games in 2014. LBC weather, heavy rain and severe gales across the north. That'll spread south and east later, a high of 11 degrees.
This is LBC.
You want to know if this wine tastes nice? My good fellow, wine is not tasted, it is experienced. Oh, it sings to the soul like a fish to the weeds. Well, it does to an expert at least.
Put a cork in it. For wine without the faff, order at redorwhitetonight.com. This Christmas, you can get a case of 12 great wines for just $5.99 a bottle. Order now at redorwhitetonight.com. $7.99 postage not included. Always drink responsibly.
TfL is transforming pedestrian areas to make my public space more attractive.
TfL is redesigning junctions and roundabouts to make my road more reliable.
TfL is investing in segregated cycle superhighways to help make my road safer.
As part of the Road Modernisation Plan, Transport for London is making life better for Londoners. Roads are becoming safer and more welcoming, so Londoners like Hazel, Miranda and Darren can get the most out of our city.
Transport for London. Every journey matters.
If you own a Swiss watch and it's time to sell it, speak to watches.co.uk. The whole process runs like clockwork. Rolex, Patek Philippe, Omega and more. It only takes a couple of ticks and we pay immediately. Or if you just fancy a change, we could take yours in part exchange. From time on your hands to money in your pocket, it couldn't be easier with watches.co.uk. The pre-owned Swiss watch specialist.
Interest. If you're not getting much of a return on your savings, speak to Cufflink. Cufflink is not a bank, but are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. You can lend your money with theirs into bricks and mortar. With Cufflink, you can get between 5 and 7.2% gross interest per annum. Talk to Cufflink at lendingtogether.co.uk and do something with your money. Past returns are not necessarily a guide to future returns. Your capital may be at risk.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
26 minutes to 12. I'm just opening up another door on my advent calendar. This is a lovely text. Do you realise how utterly childish you sound when you keep using that line about people in their mum's back bedrooms touching themselves while tapping away on a keyboard? Mate, I should have told you that if you send me a text, I can see the last 10 texts you sent to the programme, so I can see why that line upsets you so much. Let's open another door on the advent calendar now. I just want to, because it's the busiest day on the roads, a lot of people travelling. I want to say hello to two young boys who I hope are behaving themselves on their way up to Lancashire today, Dylan and Evan. Yes, I'm talking about you. You behave yourself. Do what your mum and dad tell you on that long journey. I know that you've got the radio on at the moment, and I know that coming up over the Christmas period, there are a few more treats, including a rather special edition of Steve Allen's In Conversation With. This is coming out on Boxing Day at 9 p.m. and here's a little taster.
I have to ask you three favours. I want you to read that line because one of our programmes uses the line, if you build it, he will come. Basically, they will come. They will come. And they'd like you to say, can you do that? Of course you can do that, you're a voice artist.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable saying lines from movies.
Oh, really? He uses
but
it.
for you I will.
Oh, bless you. Oh. You make me cry now.
Wait, I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it, they will come.
Fantastic. There's lots of stuff with Steve on Boxing Day, 9 p.m. Did you know that I told Radio Times he was my broadcasting hero? And they printed it. It was lovely, a lovely little moment of bonding across the presenter ocean. He bought me some Turkish Delight to say thank you, but Sheila Fogarty's producer stole it. It's 11:36. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, continuing our conversation about prisons, but also keen to bring in now the Jeremy Corbyn angle. A few of you have pointed out, in the interests of fairness, openness and balance, a few of you have suggested that the descriptions I've been providing of how the sort of neoliberal prioritisation of profit and denigration of human beings is precisely the stage onto which Jeremy Corbyn is poised to watch. Some of you even suggest that he's already popular and that this is why he's popular, because he does offer up an alternative to what, well, we've been describing all morning. I'm not convinced. I'll tell you that now. I think losing your deposit in the Richmond by-election, even though it was never a seat that they were in with a chance of winning, is a pretty grim result. The polls don't look good. Conservatives have never really been less than 10 points, fewer than 10 points ahead of Labour in this period. But you don't have to trust the polls. He is confident that they're ready to challenge the Tories in a general election. Labour is winning. This is the headline in The Independent today. Labour is winning and ready for a general election fight, says Jeremy Corbyn. From where I'm sitting, I think that's delusional to the point, actually, of illness. I don't remember being alive at a time when the Labour Party was less popular. But how much of my time is spent telling you that the rules are being written at the moment by an incredibly rabid right-wing media? So maybe I'm actually suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, even in this tiny little bastion of intelligent conversation in the British media landscape, this tiny little island of thoughtfulness and kindness and decency, Christian values, if you will. Maybe even I have been corrupted by the bile being poured into my ears by just about everybody else in the newspaper world. And Jeremy Corbyn is actually a lot more popular than we, or indeed the polls realise. Indeed, as this texter says, why do you always sneer at Mr Corbyn? I don't sneer at Mr Corbyn. I kind of just go a bit goggle-eyed. What is it that people see that I can't see? It's quite bizarre, but maybe that is part of the problem. Maybe it is because I work in the media. He has won the Labour Party leadership twice. Why shouldn't he win the big one? What do you reckon? 0345 60 973 is the number to call. And just to balance out that one about sneering, Stern's been in touch to say, lol, laugh out loud, this is how deluded Mr Corbyn is. I don't know, but he thinks Labour is winning and ready for a general election. Just comment on that headline, actually. I'm not going to inflict an interminable analysis on you. It's nearly Christmas. Labour is winning and ready for a general election fight. So, is Labour winning? 0345 60 973. And is Labour ready for a general election fight? 0345 60 973. Okay? Just either of those questions. Take your pick. And I'll tell you what, give me a ring if you've never rung me before. I'm not going to have a row with you today. If you're a fully paid up member of the Corbyn fan club, I will promise you that I will try my level best not to accuse you of believing in fairies. I'll try my absolute hardest. I can't promise I'll achieve it. I can only promise that I'll try. Okay? I will not accuse you of believing in fairies. 11:40 is the time. Alan is in Wimbledon. Alan, what would you like to say about prisons?
James, I'm listening most of the morning. Yeah. The problem is, in '96, they created drug testing in jails. I was in jail at the time, spent over 20 years in jail.
Yeah.
Everybody smoked cannabis. There was only couple of % of people that smoked the Class A drugs.
Right.
Everybody went on to the Class A drugs when they brought out the drug testing.
Why?
Because it didn't stay in your system so long.
So
when they got out, they had a drug habit. So they was committing crime to feed their drug habit that they got in jail. A prison officer said the best officer he'd ever had on a landing was called cannabis, because everybody smoked cannabis and went to bed. Nobody caused any trouble. They didn't. They just got on with their time.
You're going to struggle to get that one into the Tories manifesto, Alan.
Oh, no, I'm not saying let everyone smoke cannabis. I know.
Well, you are.
Yeah, but that was the problem. That's when it all started.
What year was it that they brought in the drug tests?
95, 96, I think it was.
And prior to that, there was no testing at all?
No, none whatsoever.
And then after that, what's the punishment if you're found to have it in your system?
Well, you lose days. You can go up in front of an independent judge.
So anything from having your sentence increased to having your privileges removed?
Exactly right.
And hang on, I just want to nail this. And is the punishment different according to what drug it is? So if I have cannabis in my system or cocaine in my system, is the punishment going to be the same?
No, it's going to be slightly different, but it goes down on your record. So when you go up for parole, because it's a drug, you don't tend to get your parole. They just leave you sitting there to smoke more A-class drugs.
And I will take the Class A drugs instead of the cannabis because I
system in 3 days.
So I've got a better chance of passing my next random drug test.
Exactly right. That's exactly
But this is
right.
This is another thing that it just obvious. And I suppose what happens is the newspapers get hold of it and they say, "Oh, everyone's stoned. It's outrageous," and that's why they changed the policy.
Yeah, but it wasn't a riot every week.
No, I know, but it doesn't matter, because if I'm writing an editorial for the Daily Mail, I don't care about riots. I just care about getting my readers riled up and getting my readers angry. And if I describe you as all being, you know, ripped to the back teeth on wacky backy or whatever they're calling it this week, then that's it. My job's done. The readers are furious and the government has to change.
Yeah, but you're going to write an editorial saying that everyone's out there head on crack and heroin this week because...
Yeah, but that doesn't sound like fun.
I would rather read they was out of their heads on cannabis than they was on...
But it doesn't sound like fun. Cannabis has a different distinction in the minds of the weird journalists running the shop at the moment. Cannabis, they kind of acknowledge that people who are smoking weed might actually be quite happy and peaceful. So they don't like that. They don't care if you're off your face on spice or crack, because that sounds awful.
It doesn't sell papers, I know that.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, that's what created the problems. You're letting people out.
I believe you.
Class A drug problem.
And so they're worse off leaving than they were coming in.
Exactly right. People come in, never touch a drug in their life. They get a bad letter off their missus, their cellmate's got a bit of gear, they smoke heroin, next thing they know, they smoke a bit more and they get their roots.
And then they're getting out and they're going to commit crimes to get the money they need to feed the habit, and they're going to be back in jail by tea time.
Because the £50 they give you on release is only going to last them a day because they go straight out and buy gear with it.
Oh, mate, put you in charge, shall we?
How simple is it?
I don't know. But then again, am I opposed to drugs tests in prison? It'd be an odd one to push politically, wouldn't it? What are you going to do? I'm going to abolish drugs tests in prisons. Even though it makes sense, according to your analysis, Alan. You can see how hard it would be to get that.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying push it through, but that was the problem. That was where it started.
Yeah, but then factor in everything else, the overcrowding, the underfunding, the lack of morale, the poor pay.
Because people are committing crime to
feed their drug habit. We've only bloody done it, haven't we? We've only solved it. That's why the overcrowding's gone up, because of the crimes they're committing to feed their habits that they developed when they were in prison in the first place. And then every new person coming through the door non-addicted is going to go out of the door addicted.
Yeah, because before, what was I don't know what the figures were in 96 of the prison population, but it weren't as high as it is today.
It's doubled since then.
Well, there you go.
I wonder if you can trace it back to the introduction of drugs tests. I've never heard this before. Have you been punting this line all over the shop? I bet you've been phoning up Clive Bull and giving him this as well. I'm sitting here patting my...
You're the first time I've ever run the radio station. I listened to Nick Ferrari this morning, and then you carried on the conversation. I thought I'll give him a bell.
Well, you've blooming done it. I've never heard this line before. It all dates back to the drugs tests.
That's what I personally think.
And from the perspective of someone who's spent 20 years inside, that is a perspective that's probably a little better.
There was only, when I was away, first off, in 80s, there was only 2 or 3% of the people smoked A-class drugs and they was looked down upon.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's only 2 or 3 people smoke the cannabis because they don't mind getting caught because they're only doing 3 months or whatever.
Well, okay. I was going to move on, but I'm just going to let people examine that idea. What about prison officers? It all started with the drugs testing, Alan's theory. I want to examine it a little more. 03456060973. Before you go, Alan, what do you think of Jeremy Corbyn?
No comment. But you had a prison officer on there earlier saying about the shortage of staff.
Yeah.
How many prison officers did they send over on a tornado squad to Swellside last night? Short of staff. How many people did they send to Birmingham on a tornado squad the other week?
What do the tornado squads do the rest of the time?
Exactly. So they're on the landings. They're only as prison officers.
I'm with you. I think. But it's the same. Prison officers are in the tornado squads, though. They're just not on tornado duty most of the time.
That's it. All they do is on a landing, and when there's trouble, they get called away. But they can send hundreds of prison officers to each prison around the country.
I don't know that that's the same thing, but you've been so impressive anyway. I'm going to leave it standing. All right. Are you sure you don't want to talk to me about Jeremy Corbyn?
No comment.
All right. It's 11:46. Single-handedly swimming against the tide of bile that has engulfed the Western world in 2016. And also solving problems on an epic scale, thanks to Alan. I think he's right. I've just checked. Mandatory drug testing came in prisons in 1996. Since then, the population of prisons has doubled, and the staffing levels have declined, and the atmosphere in prisons has got 100 times worse. You're never going to get it past conference, either Labour or Tory, well, could you get rid? What would happen if they said we're not going to do mandatory drug tests anymore? And that's why they do the spice as well, because that won't pop up in the tests, will it? So when everyone was smoking weed in prison, Alan says it was a lot happier. I'd like to challenge that if you can, as a prison officer. But of course, the testing. The hard drugs get out of your system pretty much overnight. Cannabis stays in your system for a month. So automatically they'll move on to the stuff that is not going to show up in the tests, either the Class A drugs or, which you're unlikely to find a prison officer who's prepared to bring in Class A drugs, although it does happen, or these so-called legal highs, recently illegalised, which a prison officer who is short of money and possibly prone to temptation is going to think, well, you could buy it over the counter in a shop last year. It's not that big a deal for me to take this stuff in. It's absolutely toxic. It renders people comatose and or violent. You can't be comatose and violent at the same time, I grant you. And it doesn't turn up in the testing. So it's oblivion. That's the thing. The choice of taking it. It's a pursuit of absolute oblivion. And I keep bringing it back to homeless people in London who also have a massive problem with these drugs. A woman from Westminster Council told us about it last month. It's preferable to be in that sort of a state than it is to be aware of your surroundings. So the worse prison is, the more tempting these substances become. Very strange, actually, and very interesting. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need if you want to add to the conversation. But I would also like to talk about Jeremy Corbyn, and I'll tell you why, actually. It's from Amir, who says, you often say that politics is the art of the possible, James. And whilst quite laudably and in the finest tradition of serious critical journalism, you haven't drunk the Kool-Aid in regard to Jeremy Corbyn. When I look at your values of tolerance, inclusion, egalitarianism, public services, and, dare I say it, love, then what party leader better represents your values than Corbyn, or the values he is trying to promote through his policy directions? In the spirit of pragmatism, I defy you to name me a better outcome at the next general election in seeking to represent the values that your show so admirably espouses than a Corbyn premiership. And if that doesn't work, look, what's the worst that can happen? Trump is president. It can't be any more I can't say that word on the radio, crazy than that, with the warmest of festive regards. And I don't know. I don't know why. I genuinely don't know why. But we'll take some calls on Corbyn. He thinks he could win a general election. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think he's got a cat in hell's chance. But as Amir points out, what would be more preferable? More of the same? More running down of the public services? More scapegoating of immigration? More nonsense about foreign aid? More Daily Mail-driven government? That's probably what we're going to get. Unless you can persuade me otherwise. Back to prison. Annie's in Washington, in Sussex, not in Tyne and Wear. Annie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. I wanted to do something cheerful today, but the news has let me down, Annie.
Rubbish. Okay. Two things.
Yes.
My brother's been a prison officer in a Category A prison for over 22 years. The other day, a gentleman, one of his colleagues that served far longer than him, walked into the governor's office, threw his cards and keys on the table and walked out. He said, I can't take it anymore. Wow. He's blown his pension, everything else. Now, that is a new governor that they've got in. This governor has he's already been in 3 jails, and 3 jails he's stuffed up, and he's now in my brother's prison. Now, the other thing I wanted to speak about...
What do they do? What does a bad governor do?
Like that ex-inmate said.
Yes.
He said they're just detached, a bit like our politicians.
Yes.
Just completely detached. Once in a while, walk around the wing, no support. I don't know where that chap works that said the prisons aren't overcrowded. That's absolute nonsense. I worked at Holloway.
The one he works in might not be, though. I mean,
well, absolutely. Yeah. So the one that he can't. But, I worked in Holloway once years ago because I'm a nurse. Worked there, and 6'8" to a cell. Ridiculous. But the whole drug thing, bringing the drug testing, you can eradicate that by stopping drugs coming in. Having the likes of the scanners that they have at airports, and scan the prison officers and scan the visitors in and out.
Yeah, I mean that's the third way, isn't it? No drugs at all. How hard would it be? But you remember what Alan told us a minute ago about the governor or the deputy governor who said that the best prison officer he'd ever had was cannabis.
It was cannabis, yeah. But how on earth? It's absolute crazy. Where my brother is, they're dropping drugs into the fields by drones.
Right.
God. So who's bringing,
Well, that you wouldn't get rid of that with scanning, would you, clever clogs?
No, but then who's bringing them in from the from the drones? But so those, we all know from airports, yes, you have to queue up a bit. But that's a simple thing. There'll be no reason then to be doing the drug testing if you stop them coming in from the first place. But my brother is at his absolute wit's end. He's part of this tornado team.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, and he's a PT officer. Practical is a gym instructor. But it's just awful. And he said, wait till people are killed.
And then what will happen, though?
It's going. What will happen? Well, I don't know. He was a military. He was in the Navy for years. So, that's why he went in.
No, I mean, this is. I'm just trying to work out what the key is. How do you unlock concern and make people care about the things they should care about instead of all the things they've spent 2016 caring about to the detriment of their own lives, let alone the lives of everybody shouting at them to stop driving towards the cliff edge? I do not know, but we'll start again in 2017, regroup and reset. I like this. Thanks, James. I've learned so much about prisons. Alan is surely right about the cause of today's problem, says Fran. And Debbie says, I've learned more about what goes on inside prisons by listening to these ex-inmates than I ever do from MPs and so-called experts on the subject. Brilliant conversation. Can we have more of this? Debbie, this is what I do every day. Josh is in Elmley Prison. Wow. Josh, as a professional or as a resident?
A resident at the moment, James.
So you're in jail. Are you allowed to speak to me on the phone, or are you already being naughty by doing this?
Well, I'm being a little bit naughty, James. That's why I didn't give you my proper name.
That's all right. You carry on. What did you ring in to tell me?
James, it doesn't make any difference, to be honest. The man had a few points earlier on about the man who had been in prison for a long time. He had a few good points. But to be honest, James, it doesn't make any difference whether it was in 96 or whether it's now, to the attitude of the whole prison system. If I can just tell you a very quick story.
Take your time. Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah. When I was in prison in 95, 96, I was what they call, I think they called me like a hardened prisoner type thing. So the reason I'm telling you that is because of what I saw absolutely shocked me, and it shocked me to this day. There was a white-collar worker in there. Now, the white-collar worker was in there for a very short space of time in the prison, but he was in a BCAT prison. And this man, I actually told people, you got to keep an eye on this man's a little bit vulnerable. He'd never taken drugs in his life at all before. Now, I walked, to cut a long story short because of your listeners and everything, I walked into his cell a couple of days later and I saw this man putting a needle into his arm and becoming a heroin addict, James. This man became a heroin addict in front of my eyes. Now, I went against all my policies, and I actually told the authorities about this at the time.
Because you were concerned about him?
Because I was concerned that this man it was a heartbreaking thing, James, that I'll never forget to this day. The attitude was, well, that's his problem. James, it wasn't his problem. The man didn't know what else to do. Now, as far as coming back to today is, I mean, the prisons today, I don't see that much difference. The only difference I do see today is the numbers, James. Yes, they've cut the prison staff, but it doesn't matter how many staff you've got if the attitude is wrong.
Yes, that's true.
In 96, James, they had a lot more. There was a lot more staff to prisoners. There was a lot more staff in the prisons. They've cut them all then, but. There was it's not all one way, James. I know that... No
one's suggesting it is. I completely understand what you're describing. You're describing a toxic atmosphere.
I am, James. I'm also talking about a work ethic as well. Now, James, one day I just went to ask for something, and I asked an officer for something. Now, I know I'm not a working man. I know I've done a lot of things wrong, but I asked the man for something. The man was getting some soap powder for another inmate. He said, I'm absolutely rushed off my feet at the moment. There was another man in there that I was doing some painting job, James, and this was an officer, and he actually got me to do things wrong on the things, the paint that I was taking from the stores, he was actually using for something outside the prison, James. So what I'm saying, James, is that the attitude of I tried to do a course in there, James. I sent off for a music course, and the music course, they was willing to come to the prison to give me an exam. The prison forgot to send off my application, James. Now, what I'm saying is, you can look at it any way you want, but unless the attitude, the Michael Howard in 96, I think it was
what you're telling me is if you're serious about reducing the prison population, you have to be keeping people safer while they're in prison and turning them out of prison with more than they went in with. Not with addictions and problems, but with qualifications and ambitions.
James, I know a lot of people have said it. You know the old Borstal system? I don't know if you know much about that in the old days, James.
Yes. Right, remember it. I was never a resident of one.
I know you never experienced it, James. I know that.
I went to public school, mate. There were similarities.
I'm sure it was. But the old James, some sort of system like that needs to be brought back, not just for a couple of the prisoners. It needs to be brought back. Surely there is a way of getting prisoners to work and to do some things that are worth doing. You've got the best opportunity that you're ever going to have. When you've got a man locked up in four walls, you've got the best opportunity ever of doing something with that man that you want him to do. Now, you want him to be a better person when he comes out.
Good point.
You know, James, that's
I do, but it's politically very hard to sell. I don't understand why it's a British, or even perhaps not even British, an English disease, this post-Victorian hangover that we've got. Can I ask you a question? We're a little short of time, so be brief.
Of course.
What's it like to be in prison for Christmas?
It's absolutely terrible. To be honest, James, it is really, really just another day. James, there is so many people on this wing and in this prison now that are listening to you.
In Elmley Prison,
in not just in Elmley Prison, but in a lot of prisons, and they all they all think you're a mug, James.
That's part of their punishment, is it? That's what I do. I extend the sentence. 12:01 is the time.